Welcome to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ryan Matthews. In recent weeks, we've seen a lot of different headlines in agriculture, from the continuation of a government shutdown to the reopening of instrumental Farm Service Agency offices. At the same time, we also saw the potential of importing Argentinian beef. And even since this podcast was initially recorded, we saw the potential trade deal for China to start buying U.S. soybeans again. Through it all, one thing remains clear. The farm economy is at a crisis point. On this episode of the podcast, we'll be joined by Senior Director of State and National Policy, Brad Bales, to talk through some of these recent headlines, along with advocacy efforts happening on the state and national level. That's all coming up after this.
At Ag Credit, our loan officers take the time to understand each operation, its needs, and offer the unique financing solutions it deserves. Whether your needs include financing for equipment, livestock, inputs, farm improvements, real estate, or your home, we've got you covered. With a company vision to inspire growth in agriculture and our rural communities, our team members aren't just lenders. They take an active role in their community and are advocates for agriculture. To apply online or find the location nearest you, visit us at agcredit.net. Ag Credit, committed to agriculture, committed to you.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. A government shutdown, importing beef from Argentina, and the farm economy at a crisis point. That's the headlines for just the past couple of weeks. Simply put, farmers are facing a perfect storm of challenges. Brad Bales, Senior Director of State and National Policy, joins us on the podcast to talk about what all is going on and help us understand the story here in Ohio and the nation's capital. Brad, thanks for joining.
Hey, thank you, Ryan.
Absolutely. So right now we are on track to have the longest government shutdown in history. Can you talk about what all that means for agriculture and our rural communities?
Yeah. I mean, not only is it the longest on track, there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. So right now we're on day 28. We could be going to day 35, which would be the longest one, and beyond. So it's very difficult to say. What I do know is outside of the shutdown, there are other things that we need to talk about. You talked about the farm economy. We need to have conversations about that. We need to be talking about a short-term solution and a long-term solution. We also need to be talking about Farm Bill 2.0. Earlier this year, there was a lot of good things that we discussed in the HR 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, as other people know it. But unfortunately, there are some aspects of the Farm Bill that will either need to be extended. And again, we're on the 2018 Farm Bill. That will have to be extended. This would be the third extension, or we need to really put pen to paper and come up with some reforms and do an updated Farm Bill for 2025 or 2026. And then also with the farm economy, we really got to figure out those solutions. Unfortunately, while shutdown is on, that's off the table. There's no having conversations about that. And so we're really seeing delays in that aspect, unfortunately, when it comes to the legislative front.
I'd love to break that down a little bit. So starting with the government shutdown, obviously Congress is kind of at a stalemate right now.
Yep.
Are there any upcoming deadlines that might kind of shift that to kind of get Congress to go into action, or are we just kind of seeing where it goes?
So there's going to be either one of two things that happen. I would say November 1st is when a lot of programs that Ohioans rely upon, such as SNAP, are going to expire. Those dollars won't be there. So that's one thing that could be enough to put pressure in order to get action. The other thing could be something like the National Defense Authorization Act. If Congress can come together, especially the Senate, because right now we're on a 13th failed vote for a continuing resolution, that would just basically be where we're at current levels, funding through to November 21st. It was originally only going to be 7 weeks. Now we're looking at 3 weeks. But that being said, if Congress could vote on something like an NDAA or some other type of legislation where we can maybe see some bipartisan buy-in, that might be enough to clear the logjam. But as of right now, there's really no deadlines. It's going to be the pressure that comes from the outside. So that's either going to be the public saying, please come together, act, or it's going to be something that happens internally that, in a way, breaks the ice and gets people to start having conversations again.
Now, in the midst of all of that, farmers need our local farm services agencies.
Yes.
So Secretary Rollins, I know last week, talked about our guest a couple of weeks ago, talked about some limited access and some opening of all 2,100 offices.
Yep.
What does that mean, and what kind of services will those offices be holding?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, when it comes to the constituencies, there's really no winners when it comes to a shutdown, unfortunately. I would say USDA has done a good job of, up until the most recent announcement, at least trying to keep some of the busier FSA offices open. But now that we're knowing that there's going to be at least 2 employees for every FSA office, at least we'll get some limited help for all of those 21 offices. So whether or not this is something where FSA has to come in and help out with a bank loan, such as just basically acknowledging the loan and being able to take that back to your local bank or whoever you work with, being able to make sure that that's, passes all the boxes or checks all the boxes. And, that's one aspect. But there's plenty of services there. And right now, middle of harvest, whatever we can do to have the help that we need. I know we're probably on the very back end of the harvest season, but it's just good to know that those local offices are open.
Like you said, a shutdown doesn't really help anyone, so it's good to see some of those offices opening their doors, having some employees there to kind of help farmers and rural community members get some of the access they need.
Even if it's just answering some simple questions.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not you're trying to get some sort of grant or anything through a USDA, especially FSA, just know that they're there and you'll be able to ask questions. That's service that we are welcome to have open. And I'd say as a constituency for farmers, that is one of the good things I'd say that is coming out of the shutdown is we know that services like that are still available to us.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of announcements, in the past couple of weeks, recently the administration also talked about potentially importing beef from Argentina.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit, maybe some high level of what that would do for markets here, both in Ohio and across the country?
So, take a step back. There's been some consternation with Argentina just in general, because the same week that there was announced from the administration that there was going to be a money swap or basically some assistance coming from the States to Argentina, the same week that occurred was also the same week that China, who's not been buying our soybeans, announced that they were going to go to Argentina and fill that void. So there was the beginning of the heartburn. But now the talk of importing Argentinian beef is definitely for, I would say, as we have difficulties in the farm economy, beef is the one shining light. That is the one area of the farm economy that is doing great. And and it's not like it's been a very long time that they've been in that situation. This is making up for a long time where they were in a very poor situation. And so, it was hurtful for our cattle farmers or ranchers. But now what's being announced is that the U.S., which had a 20,000 metric ton, I think, limit for the amount of import beef that we were going to import, has now quadrupled it. So now we're at 80,000 metric tons. While I would say it's a single-digit percentage of what would make up the overall market in the States, it's still a percentage nonetheless. And so, we'll continue to do what we can. I would like to do more for the United States herd and making sure, I believe we could have brought down beef prices by ourselves if we were just given a little bit more time. But we're gonna keep plugging away.
Hopefully we see some action there to make sure that we get to kind of handle that market along with all the players in the supply chain.
Yes.
Yeah. So zooming out a little bit, outside of trade relations and tariffs, we've talked a lot about how the farm economy is at a crisis point.
Yes.
Farmers have a lot of different pressure points on them right now. Can you kind of talk about some of those other pressure points that they're feeling?
Other than what it takes to be a farmer, which is already hard enough as it is, all the pressure points are being pushed right now. As everybody knows, it doesn't matter what business sector you're in, things are more expensive than they were since 2022. We've had 3 straight years and probably going on a 4th straight year of record high input costs for agriculture. So you have things are way more expensive than they used to be in order to conduct your business. But at the same time, we have commodity prices that in many regards are the same levels that they were in the mid 70s, even before I was around. And so you have those two factors alone mean narrow margins. But then also you add in the trade discussions that we've been having over the past, what are we in late October? So going on almost 11 months. You add all three of those together, and like you said, we're looking at a superstorm. It's very unfortunate. I hope, I don't really know what we can do with input prices right now, except for to get them to stagnate, and then hopefully they stay there for years. Mm-hmm. But then also, what can we do for our commodity prices, especially as we still have supply in our storage from 2024. If we don't have things going out of country, especially when our industry, especially in Ohio, with a lot of the plants that we put in the ground, a significant percentage, anywhere from a third to a half, were put there in order to be exported. So now we got to find places to store those because the market's not here in the States. Where are we going to store it? So now we have a storage issue as well. Mm-hmm. It's something I've never seen before. And for those folks out there that are dealing with it, keep hanging in there. We're having our conversations. We've already started talking to the Congress about the need for some sort of assistance. I would say that's a short-term solution, but then also what can we do for our markets domestically to make sure that we're expanding upon those and doing what we can to utilize more of our product.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, just talking about how farmers feel like every pressure point is being hit right now.
Yes.
Both, input costs, what they're feeling in the field right now, but where is that product going to go? Whether it's tariffs or, down the road having those storage issues. You talked about some advocacy efforts and talking about those and having those conversations both on the state and national level. So recently, Farm Bureau sent a letter to the administration and Congress talking about how agriculture is at that crisis point. And they outlined some short-term along with long-term relief. Can you kind of talk about some of those priorities that were in those letters?
Well, short-term is going to be with what we're dealing with right now. And while I know every farmer would like to go to market and be able to take home a check for the profit that they made from their goods, right now it's looking like with the very razor thin margins that we're going to have, that's going to be nearly impossible. So what do we got to do? We got to get them across the finish line and get them into next year. And that's going to be in the form of bridge payments or some sort of economic assistance. What that number looks like is still to be determined. We still have those conversations, and hopefully a shutdown comes to a close here soon, so we can begin to have those conversations. But that's the short-term solution, unfortunately, is to have our folks just basically have some sort of assistance. What we don't want to see is generational farms being sold off and people getting out of business because it's just not economically sound for them anymore. We want to see old farmers and new farmers alike to be able to continue for years to come. And that, unfortunately, is going to have to be just one tool in the toolbox. But a long-term solution is going to be, what can we do to expand our markets? How can we do more with what we currently have? Year-round E15 is a perfect example. While we've been given waivers from US EPA, and I do know US EPA has changed rules around a little bit to make that so that way the Midwest states especially can get around the Clean Air Act provisions that are in there when it comes to the sale of E15. But what we would like to do is have Congress codify it. It has many benefits. I mean, one of them is just basically to make sure that, while this administration is friendly towards E15, that the next administration doesn't completely do a 180 on us and reverse course. By codifying it, it makes it much more difficult to change courses. So that's one. I would say the second one is with codification, knowing that there's not going to be a reversal in course from a future administration who might have different take on the issue. We basically encourage investment in ethanol, because for those markets and for those who want to do production of ethanol, that requires a lot of capital. And they're not going to invest that capital if they think that somebody could wake up one day and just decide, well, this E15 is no longer for me. So codifying it encourages investments in the Midwest and Ohio. And I think we're properly positioned for that. And so that would just be one example. Other example is just bringing back the requirement for whole milk in schools. That's a simple one. Mm-hmm. And there's a giant list. I mean, we could deal with interstate commerce. I mean, the whole conversation around Prop 12 and the patchwork of states. If we could get around that and do some reforms to make sure that one state is not the tail wagging the dog of the rest of the country, that would be ideal. That would be another way to kind of build some confidence, give some certainty to farmers, and make sure that we can move forward and protect our markets. So,
absolutely, I think that letter does a good job of saying exactly what you were saying, right? That right now we need to figure out and make sure that farmers are getting from this season to the next.
Yep.
According to the USDA, we lost 141,000 farms in the course of 5 years. Here in Ohio, that was 1,800 just from 2023 to 2024.
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it's insane. We want to make sure that no one else has to make that decision, right? You talked about generational farms and that they don't have to make that ultimate decision just to close their doors, and close their books. It talks about that short-term solution, making sure we get to the next season, but also where agriculture also needs help on these different areas. Yeah, because I think a lot of times, we focus on one issue, but I think that was a really good layout, just talking about, hey, this isn't the only thing on the table. We have a lot of different, like you said, pressure points on every single side. So making sure that things get talked about and making sure that we continue that work. And along with that letter, Farm Bureau, both American Farm Bureau and here at Ohio Farm Bureau,
yes,
we had the action alert for members to reach out to their lawmakers to talk about the story on their farm and why and how we need Congress to fix this crisis point. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why is that so important for members to reach out to their lawmakers?
Yes, absolutely. So when we put out that action alert, knowing the significance of what the farm economy is right now, I mean, it's bleak. While I can go into members' offices in Congress and have a good conversation with them, they know that I'm a trusted resource, that I'm not going to try to lead them astray or give them bad information. And that's great. That's the role that I fill. But what our members bring to the table is their own story. And this is definitely an example of where a force of numbers will pay dividends for what we're trying to accomplish, to show that there are thousands of people affected in Ohio is what we're trying to do. And for me, who's an advocate and works in Congress and everything, I can tell you there's not a more precious resource than our membership. Because when they come in and they talk to their members, especially the members they represent their district, that is the message that gets through them. Because, while I'm just hitting the talking points, they're sharing their story. And so the call to action is just a piece of that puzzle, is to show how many people are being affected. But that is the importance of a call to action. And so whatever we can do to get more people to sign on and make sure that they're reaching out to their congressional offices, their congressional member, and letting them know that this is an issue, the better. I mean, that will make it so that way what do I say? They know that it's not just Brad coming to them and saying there's a problem. They're seeing it from their constituency within their district. And so that, with that being said, they're going to have a little bit different viewpoint than if it was just me coming in and, lobbying them, just like everybody else that will come in and lobby them that day, So, this call to action is very important. We need to get the word out. We need to be talking about the farm economy. We need to be talking about next steps. And this isn't just like a one-track solution. This is, we're not just asking for another handout. We want to put agriculture back in a position where the farmer can go take his stuff to market, and then at that point, bring home the check. We want them to have that independence, because that is true independence, is be able to make your own money. And so that's where we want to put people. This is just a step, and hopefully everybody's signing on.
Absolutely. And where can our members go for more information on that?
That would be on our website. That's under ofbf.org.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for talking through us,
Yes.
talking through all these different topics, hitting some of these big issues, because
May I make a real quick plug?
Yeah.
I know a lot of the things that we talked about today are dim at best. And so for anybody that's having issues out there, and needs to talk to somebody, pound 988 is the number. Don't hesitate to call. It's completely confidential and anonymous. So if everybody finds themselves in that situation, I hope they utilize that resource.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. With all these issues, mental health is an important topic.
Yep.
It's still a big stereotype, especially in the ag community. So
right.
Talk about it more, having someone to talk to, pounding 988 is a great resource. So Thank you for sharing that. Brad Bales, Senior Director of State and National Policy for Ohio Farm Bureau. Brad, thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Find previous podcasts at ohiofarmbureau.org and search podcasts.